Welcome everybody to another video of Lab Galactic. Today we'll be covering overview causes of disease. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So this man here on my left is a picture of Hippocrates, and he was the first one to study natural causes of disease in 400 BCE. And he introduced the concept of aetiology, where the scientific perspective that all diseases must have a cause, and conditions with unknown causes are termed idiopathic. So, Hippocrates, first to study natural causes. Natural causes in 400 BCE, and introduced the term aetiology. Aetiology, which means all diseases must have a cause. Must have a cause. And conditions unknown with unknown causes are termed idiopathic. Idiopathic. Okay, that's simple, right? So moving further along, classifying the causes. So causes of disease are categorized either as intrinsic or extrinsic, and there's a picture here, a diagram. So here, intrinsic means from within, and extrinsic obviously means from outside. From outside. Okay. So let's look now about intrinsic causes. So changes in an individual's genome may be due to nuclear or mitochondrial, inherited mutations and other genetic variations, de novo mutations, and epigenetic modifications. And these intrinsic causes typically alter the function of a gene or a group of genes. So, changes in an individual genome. And this may be due to nuclear or mitochondrial, because nuclear or mitochondrial can be found from within, inherited mutations, which will be covered in future genomics videos, pedigree, de novo mutations, and epigenetic modifications. All these terms are covered in our genomic playlist, so if you do not understand any of these concepts, take a look at those videos. Moving further along, cell autonomously allows individual cells to function and make decisions based on their inherited characteristics, contributing to the diverse and specialized functions of different cell types within an organism. So that's something that we have to look at, because, for example, let me give you an example here. Cell X, right, no longer secretes, no longer expresses structural protein protein Y, so cell X is the wrong shape. Wrong shape. So if we read it again, cell autonomously allows individual cells to function and make decisions based on their inherited characteristic. So inherited characteristic, we're looking at the structure of cell X. And this contributes to a diverse and specialized function of different cell types within an organism, so it affects other cells around it. So if cell X does no longer express the structural protein Y, cell X is the wrong shape because it may affect other cells around it. It may not bind to a specific receptor, as an example. So cell autonomously is something that is an intrinsic cause. Moving on, non-cell autonomously, cell X involve factors within a cell that are influenced or regulated by external signals from neighboring cells or the microenvironment. For instance, signaling molecules released by nearby cells may trigger specific responses in target cells, altering their function or fate. So this is different. Instead of cell X, for example, here in the autonomously one, cell X had a wrong structural protein. Now let's switch it up a bit. Example now, if cell X was to no longer secrete protein hormone, Y, cell Z, for example, does no longer function. No longer functions. Okay. So a cell X no longer secretes protein hormone Y. As a result, cell Z no longer functions. So those are your two concepts which you may need to memorize, or it's good to understand: cell autonomously and non-cell autonomously. So now let's moving on to the extrinsic causes. So there are many factors, such as injury, obviously, infection, nutrition and diet, so you need to look after yourselves, and diet, lifestyle, so again that could fit in with nutrition and diet, but lifestyle will be mostly like smoking. If you smoke, a lot of vapes going around, smoking. Also your workplace, if it contains a lot of toxins. So if you work in, let's say, the construction site and you're exposed to asbestos, that could affect your lifestyle, or that could affect yourself, an intrinsic cause, but that is your lifestyle. Chemical poisoning. And exposure to radiation. So again, it could fit with lifestyle. If you're a radiologist, you are exposed to radiation. Or even sunlight. That's a type of radiation. You just need to protect yourself with sun cream. So extrinsic causes are those: injury, infection, nutrition and diet, lifestyle, chemical poisoning, exposure to radiation. Okay, but there are some grey areas here because the terms intrinsic or extrinsic can be a bit ambiguous. Okay, so intrinsic and extrinsic is ambiguous because they are basically an umbrella term of things that could affect the body and be ambiguous. So causes of disease are often a chain of events. It's not just one thing happens to you and that's it. For example, allergies caused by a sensitive immune system, which is intrinsic, or the preceding allergen. For example, pollen, that's extrinsic. So mostly these causes of disease are often a chain of events. A chain of events. And an example is allergies caused by a sensitive immune system. A sensitive, I'm just going to abbreviate that, immune system. And that's extrinsic. And the preceding allergen, that's intrinsic, because that's your immune system. Intrinsic. And the allergen is extrinsic. Right. Intrinsic or extrinsic depends on a viewpoint, i.e. to what cell, tissue, and organ it specifically affects. So, moving on, there are multiple causes, as we already said before. One cause, and Hippocrates thought one cause meant one disease, but that is not necessarily true. Many diseases are the product of multiple interacting factors. Risk factors can be a more accurate term than cause, which we now use. So the whole term of one cause is one disease, planted by Hippocrates, is rarely true. Many diseases are due to many factors. Many diseases are a product of multiple interacting factors. And we just use this now as the term now used is risk factors. Okay. Obviously, disease can be an onset of age. Age is a contributing factor to many diseases, but is it a cause? Is age in itself a cause of a disease? Well, age is often just meant by time. So as biologists, age is time. In the context of cause that, as we age, we accumulate many genetic mutations. And that's true because our body is constantly repairing, building, and obviously we accumulate those mutations over time. So, concept to consider, age just means time. And if we wanted to represent this in a graph, to make this simple, we love to add a bit of mathematics to biology. Number of mutations. So here we have, we abbreviate this, number of mutations. Let's pick something, cartilage damage. Oh, that's two. Cartilage damage. And so number of mutations, we're looking at cancer risk. And with cartilage damage over time, well, most old people have this, and that is osteoporosis or osteoarthritis risk. Osteoarthritis risk. And it's just a simple graph. Oh, sorry, I need to label my x-axis here. So time, or otherwise known as age, over a period of time, the longer we live, the more mutations we start to accumulate, and therefore our risk of obtaining osteoarthritis or cancer increases. So again, time also means accumulation. There we go. So what do we consider age to be? So age can be an intrinsic cause when it describes the biological processing of aging. So age can be considered intrinsic. Intrinsic when we're talking about the biological processes of aging. So for example, the risk of osteoporosis okay. Oh no, sorry. Not the risk. Well, that would be our end product. Let me start with age. So aging, and then for females, there reaches a certain point of time where you reach your menopause, and as a result, when you stop producing eggs, your menopause state, your body starts to decrease in estrogen, decrease production of estrogen. And as a result, that has a direct effect on osteoporosis. So again, aging is not necessarily, okay, as you age, you're definitely going to develop osteoporosis, but there is a mechanism behind everything where if you age, yes, females will eventually reach a point where they stop ovulating and they reach their menopause state. And as a result, the biological process is that if they don't ovulate anymore, they decrease their production of estrogen, and as a result, they have an increased chance of developing osteoporosis. So aging is therefore considered intrinsic. So an alternative description. So for many diseases, causes are a group as genetic and environment. So so we were presented with intrinsic and extrinsic. But intrinsic can be expressed as genetic, if you want to look at it in that way. And extrinsic, well, you can think of it your environment. Yep. These terms are versions of intrinsic and extrinsic, and that are reflective of that disease. So to give an example here, Parkinson's disease risk factor. So we've got 1, because many old people tend to have Parkinson's, so age could be 1. 2, well, is genetics. Some people may be prone to getting Parkinson's, while others don't necessarily develop it. And your environment, it does have an impact, because studies have shown, for example, bilinguals or people that know more than one language prolong the onset of Parkinson's, because your brain is wired in a more intricate way, and so it just keeps Parkinson's further away. Think about it like that. So Parkinson's, let's put it in red. Inherited gene variant. The gene variant. And your risk factors can be considered exposure to pesticides, for example, herbicides, solvents, and other environmental toxins. So exposure to harmful chemicals. Go with that. Harmful chemicals. And again, as you can see, one's intrinsic because we're talking about genes, and the other one is extrinsic because we're talking about harmful chemicals such as herbicides, pesticides, and solvents, which again turns to your environment. All right. So causes of disease in this module. Well, Now we're turning into cause of disease, intrinsic, specifically intrinsic. So many, i.e. molecular basis of disease, such as cancer. Examples are leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, and breast prostate. Here we have a question. What is adenocarcinoma and why is it invasive in this case? Oh, okay. Let's look at the picture first. And as biomedical scientists, we tend to look at the microscope quite a lot, and we need to understand what the heck we're looking at. And here we're presented with a normal prostate epithelium. Normal prostate epithelium. And here, so these are your normal cells, bam. But then, according to the question here presented, this person has an invasive carcinoma, and they're presented here, supposedly. Invasive carcinoma. Which is a type of cancer, or adenocarcinoma. Okay. So adenocarcinoma specifically originates from cells that line or form the glands, as we can see here, the lining of the glands, which are a structure that produces and secretes fluid. In your anatomy module, yes, your prostate does secrete fluid when it comes to the production of semen. So it produces, secretes fluid, and they line cells that line or form the glands. When cancer becomes invasive, it means the abnormal cells have penetrated and spread beyond the layer of tissue where they initially developed. So in this case, your normal prostate epithelium or cells that line the gland or the prostate gland start from here, outside here, and they've become invasive because they're deep within the tissue. So invasive adenocarcinoma. As an example, developmental disease. So another intrinsic disease here is neural tube defects. So neural tube defects are congenital anomalies that occur during early embryonic development when the neural tube, which forms the brain and spinal cord, fails to close properly. Therefore, taking folic acid supplementation before and early pregnancies is crucial in reducing the risk of neural tube defects. So again, this is the development of the fetus. And if the mother does not have enough folic acid during, before, and early pregnancies, you could develop neural tube defects, which is a congenital abnormality. And this is intrinsic because everything happens during your development stage. Okay, another one, inherited anemia. Okay, examples, sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. Sickle cell anemia is a genetic blood disorder characterized by the production of abnormal hemoglobin, causing red blood cells to adopt a rigid sickle-like shape. This can lead to blood vessels blocking, pain, and complications due to impaired oxygen delivery. Sickle cell anemia. So we know that is a genetic blood disorder. Automatically, it's intrinsic. Okay, and this leads to the abnormal shape of hemoglobin. So abnormal hemoglobin, and that causes blockage and pain. As we can see here, under the microscope, sickle cell is like a moon, crescent-like shape presented here. Okay. Beta thalassemia is a hereditary blood disorder characterized by reduced or absent synthesis of beta-globin chains of hemoglobin, leading to anemia, fatigue, and potential complications due to abnormal red blood cell formation. So again, the key word here is hereditary blood disorder, something to do with your genetics. You've inherited this from one of your parents, or maybe both. And this is abnormal because it causes fatigue, potential complications due to the red blood cell formation. And since is the absence of beta globin chains. They look quite pale, as you can see here. They're quite pale in structure, so you'd call this so they're quite large, aren't they? So I would go with macrocytic hypochromic. But correct me if I'm wrong. Hypochromic meaning that they're quite pale in structure. Pale and a lack of hemoglobin. Lack of heme. Okay. Inherited metabolic disease. Example, phenylketonuria is a genetic disorder characterized by the inability of the blood to properly metabolize an amino acid called phenylalanine. This results in the accumulation of phenylalanine in the blood, which can lead to intellectual disabilities, development delays, and other neurological problems if not treated early. So, inherited metabolic disease characterized phenylketonuria. Your body cannot metabolize amino acids properly, and this can lead to intellectual disabilities. And most of the time when people are mentally retarded, this normally tends to be a genetic problem. Yeah, genetic mutation. So let's have some quick fire questions to end off the session today. We've covered quite a bit. So, intrinsic or extrinsic trisomy of chromosome 21 inherited at conception. By trisomy, I mean you have 3 copies of the chromosome. All humans have 2 copies of each chromosome. That's why we have 2 pairs of 23 chromosomes. But in this case, we have 3 pairs of this chromosome 21. So as we all know, anything that relates to genetics or the body or the structural makeup of the body is called intrinsic. So it's inherited, it's intrinsic. Okay. Answer intrinsic. Well done to those who got it correct. Cause of COVID-19 infection with SARS-CoV-2. Something that happened fairly recently. And yes, it is extrinsic, as it is an infection. Extrinsic. It's something to do with the environment. That's why they told us to isolate ourselves to avoid the harmful environment. Okay. Okay, so we have causes of lung cancer from Cancer Research UK, risk and causes. Okay, so this one is slightly more complicated. Smoking tobacco. That is your lifestyle, so that is extrinsic. Chemicals and workplace, again, your lifestyle, so extrinsic, abbreviated. Air pollution, again, extrinsic. Previous lung disease, right, so that's something to do with yourself, and so that will be intrinsic. Exposure to radion gas, again, that could be due to your workplace, extrinsic. And family history, that has to do with genes, so that is intrinsic. So when we talk about lung cancer, we can't just say, oh, it's an extrinsic cause or an intrinsic cause. It could be either one or both, depending on your family history or any previous conditions you may have had. But other than that, if you're perfectly normal, your family did not have any previous lung cancer disease before, then yes, it may be due to your workplace because, industrialization, harmful toxins in the air, etc., may lead to the development of cancer. I'll be leaving the learning outcomes on the description below. If I've missed anything, please comment. If you have any questions, leave your questions below. And thank you for listening.